Elijah pushed his mop across the gleaming linoleum of Nexus Corp's executive floor. The rhythmic squeak, a familiar lullaby in the pre-dawn silence. 32 years. 32 years of polishing chrome, emptying bins, and being as invisible as the dust motes dancing in the slivers of sunlight that crept through the panoramic windows. To the ambitious sharks in their tailored suits, he was merely part of the company's infrastructure, as unremarkable and essential as the air conditioning. But Elijah's mind wasn't on the lingering scent of yesterday's expensive coffee. It was on the market fluctuations, the whispers of acquisition, the subtle tremors he detected in Nexus's financial foundation for months. While his colleagues chased bonuses and prestige, Elijah had been meticulously building his own empire, brick by patient brick, from the meager earnings of his humble profession. His retirement fund was a 9-figure sum, meticulously curated through decades of shrewd, anonymous investments, a testament to a self-taught genius hidden behind a worn uniform. His nights, once spent in a cramped apartment with financial books stacked high as the fridge, had evolved into global calls with analysts, secret investments in rising technologies, and quiet conversations with silent partners. His only indulgence, an antique coin collection and a small chessboard always present in his locker, pieces arranged mid-game, symbolizing a long-played strategy. Then, the storm broke. Not the electronic market crash they'd all braced for, but a far more insidious kind. Embezzlement. A gaping hole in Nexus Corp's balance sheet, orchestrated by the very people who preached integrity. Panic rippled through the company like a rogue wave. Layoffs began. The stock plummeted. The titans of industry, the titans of Nexus, crumpled like paper cranes. Elijah didn't blink. He'd seen the signs, the bloated travel budgets, the ghost accounts, the creative accounting hidden deep in quarterly reports. His instinct said wait. His strategy said move. It was time. He activated his network, his hidden brokers, his silent partners. An anonymous consortium began buying shares at record lows. Inside boardrooms, chaos reigned. Investors bailed. Employees feared for their futures. But beneath it all, one steady current flowed upward, Elijah's influence. Within weeks, the unlikely news sent shockwaves through the tech world. Elijah Vance, Nexus Corp's long-serving janitor, had acquired a controlling stake. The silence that greeted him on his first day as acting CEO was deafening. The polished floors felt different under his now authoritative gaze. The hushed whispers weren't about his cleaning schedule anymore, but about his audacity. The initial shock gave way to a simmering resentment. The first sabotage was subtle. Important documents went missing from his temporary office. Then, an anonymous leak to the press painted him as an opportunistic interloper, a common thief aiming to strip Nexus for parts. The executives he'd inherited, men he'd once discreetly cleaned their overflowing wastebaskets, now met his every directive with thinly veiled contempt and deliberate obstruction. They couldn't stomach taking orders from a man who still knew the precise way to buff out scuff marks. Meetings were delayed. Email servers crashed mysteriously. One VP even went so far as to question Elijah's mental capacity for leadership during a private call, unaware it had been legally recorded. Then came the gut punch. Sarah, the young head of marketing, a woman Elijah had always treated with kindness, a woman whose father, a former Nexus executive he'd often shared quiet coffee breaks with, confessed under pressure. It was her, with her intimate knowledge of the company's digital infrastructure, who had been feeding the saboteurs information. Her father, she wept, had been threatened, his own precarious retirement leveraged against her cooperation. The betrayal was a cold, heavy stone in Elijah's gut. He was alone, seemingly. The board, composed of the old guard, was actively plotting his downfall. The media was in a frenzy. His own employees, conditioned to see him as the lowest rung, were unsure whether to respect him or fear him. But Elijah wasn't a man to crumble. He remembered the countless nights he'd scrubbed away the grime, the quiet determination that had built his fortune. He'd faced worse. The dirty looks and dismissive laughs of early investors. The hunger of nights spent skipping meals to fund just one more share. This was nothing new, just a bigger mess to clean. And he would clean it. Elijah didn't waste time sulking. Instead, he began to quietly rebuild from within. He called on people who remembered him not just as the janitor, but as a man of precision, kindness, and quiet brilliance. Maria, the sharp-witted accountant he'd once helped with a complex tax form, became his acting CFO. David, the IT specialist whose computer Elijah once repaired with a paperclip and logic, took over cybersecurity. They weren't executives. They weren't flashy, but they were loyal, talented, and trusted him. Elijah initiated a full audit of company finances, contracts, and personnel. What he found was worse than he feared. Layer upon layer of deceit, from inflated invoices to fictitious consulting fees. He compiled the evidence and sent it, not to the board, but directly to the authorities. The message was clear: corruption had a price, and Elijah Vance was done cleaning up after it quietly. He made changes swift and bold. Lavish bonuses were frozen. A mentorship program for entry-level employees was launched. Elijah's story, though still a scandal to some, was becoming an inspiration to others, especially the junior staff who'd always dreamed of breaking the glass ceiling. The media began to shift. Where once they questioned his legitimacy, they now marveled at his approach. Interviews followed, but Elijah gave none. Instead, he released a simple statement. This isn't about revenge. It's about restoration. Internally, he scheduled one-on-ones with department heads, not in the boardroom, but in their workspaces. He listened, asked questions, and slowly, trust began to grow. Even the press-shy engineers started talking about the CEO who knows how to solder a circuit and sweep a hallway. The board, however, was not impressed. Behind closed doors, they prepared a vote of no confidence. But Elijah anticipated this. He called an emergency shareholders meeting and revealed the full scope of the corruption and his plan to revitalize Nexus from the inside out. The moment that sealed his standing came when Sarah, given a second chance, stood beside him at that meeting. She confessed everything, took full responsibility, and announced her resignation. But Elijah interrupted. Sarah isn't resigning, he said. She's leading our transparency initiative. Because redemption is real, and people can change. The boardroom erupted into debate, but the shareholders, moved by the raw honesty, by Elijah's vision, voted in his favor. Several board members resigned. The rest were placed under investigation. Nexus Corp began to transform. The janitor who once scrubbed its floors was now the architect of its rebirth. And he didn't change who he was. He still wore simple clothes, still took the stairs instead of the private elevator, and still ate lunch with employees in the cafeteria. Elijah rolled out programs that rewarded ideas from all levels of the company. He implemented mental health days, flexible schedules, ethical supply chain audits. The company's value began to rise, not just financially, but morally. Clients returned, citing Elijah's leadership as the reason. But perhaps the most powerful moment came months later, when Elijah returned to the executive floor with a mop, not to clean, but to hang it, framed on the wall of the new Nexus Hall of Integrity. A symbol, a reminder. Beside it, a plaque read, "True leadership is not how high you rise, but how deeply you care." Nexus was built by ambition. It was saved by humility. In the end, Elijah Vance didn't just save a company. He changed what it meant to lead. And as he stood beneath the soft lights of the atrium, surrounded by those who once doubted him and those who now believed in him, he finally allowed himself a small smile. The floors, it turned out, had only been the beginning.